When Mongol Khan ascended to power in 1251, one of his first priorities was to carry forward the grand ambition his grandfather Genghis Khan had left unfinished, the conquest of the known world. To spearhead the campaign against the Western nations, Mongol entrusted the mission to his brother, Hulagu Khan, another of Genghis Khan's grandsons. Hulagu spent 5 years gathering and organizing his army before he was finally ready to set the campaign in motion. Launching his offensive from the Mongol stronghold in Persia, Hulagu pushed southward with devastating force. In a relatively short period, his armies brought down some of the most enduring and powerful dynasties the region had ever seen. Mongol had issued clear instructions. Those who surrendered peacefully were to be treated with mercy, while those who resisted faced total annihilation. Many nations lying in the Mongols' path chose submission, adding their own soldiers to the already formidable Mongol force. By the time the army reached Baghdad, it had absorbed Georgian troops, Armenian warriors, and even Frankish contingents from the Principality of Antioch. The assassin strongholds across Persia were dismantled. The Abbasid Caliphate of Baghdad, an institution that had endured for 5 centuries, was obliterated. The Ayyubid dynasty ruling from Damascus was swept away as well. With each successive campaign, the Mongols appeared unstoppable, and their westward momentum showed no sign of slowing. Hulagu's next objective was to drive southward through the Kingdom of Jerusalem and engage the Mamluk Sultanate, the dominant Islamic military power remaining in the region. In 1260, he dispatched envoys to Qutuz in Cairo, bearing a letter demanding his immediate surrender. Qutuz's response was defiant and brutal. The envoys were executed, and their severed heads were mounted on display at Bab Zuwayla, one of Cairo's famous city gates. Yet despite this provocation, Hulagu found himself unable to pursue the matter further at that moment. Hulagu's next objective was to drive southward through the Kingdom of Jerusalem and engage the Mamluk Sultanate, the dominant Islamic military power remaining in the region. In 1260, he dispatched envoys to Qutuz in Cairo, bearing a letter demanding his immediate surrender. Qutuz's response was defiant and brutal. The envoys were executed, and their severed heads were mounted on display at Bab Zuwayla, one of Cairo's famous city gates. Yet despite this provocation, Hulagu found himself unable to pursue the matter further at that moment. Hulagu himself later explained that he had pulled back the majority of his forces for several reasons: the logistical challenge of sustaining such a massive army in the region, the depletion of local grazing lands needed to feed the horses, and a long-standing Mongol tradition of retreating to cooler territories during the summer months. In the meantime, Mongol diplomats made efforts to establish what became known as a Franco-Mongol alliance, or at minimum to secure the submission of what remained of the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem. These overtures, however, were blocked by Pope Alexander IV, who formally prohibited any such cooperation. The Crusader barons of Acre, who had been approached by both the Mongols and the Mamluks simultaneously, found themselves caught between 2 powerful and opposing forces. Although the Mamluks had historically been enemies of the Frankish states, the barons concluded that the Mongols represented the more pressing and immediate danger. As a result, the Crusaders adopted a stance of careful neutrality. In a remarkable and pragmatic concession, the Crusaders allowed the Egyptian Mamluk army to march northward through their territory unhindered, and even permitted them to camp and resupply near Acre. When word reached the Mamluks that Mongol forces had crossed the Jordan River, Sultan Qutuz led his army southeast toward a location known as Ain Jalut, meaning Spring of Goliath in Arabic, or Herod's Spring in Hebrew, situated in the Jezreel Valley. The Mongol vanguard arrived first. Their force comprised soldiers from the Kingdom of Georgia and roughly 500 troops drawn from the Armenian Kingdom of Cilicia. The Mamluks, however, held a crucial advantage: intimate knowledge of the surrounding terrain. Qutuz used this to his benefit by concealing the main body of his army in the surrounding highlands and sending a smaller contingent under the command of Baibars to engage the Mongols directly. For several grueling hours, Baibars employed hit-and-run tactics, striking quickly, provoking the enemy, then withdrawing, all while carefully preserving his larger force from unnecessary attrition. When the Mongols launched another heavy assault, Baibars and his men staged what appeared to be a desperate final retreat, drawing the Mongols in pursuit toward the high ground. This maneuver was no accident. Baibars reportedly had devised much of the battle's overall strategy himself, having spent years in that very region as a fugitive and knowing its geography intimately. The Mongol commander Kitbuqa, already irritated by the persistent withdrawal tactics of Baibars, made a critical error in judgment. Rather than pausing to question whether a trap had been set, he ordered his entire force to give chase. The Mongols followed, straight into the highlands. As soon as they entered the elevated terrain, hidden Mamluk soldiers revealed themselves. Arrows rained down from above, and cavalry charged in from multiple directions. The Mongols suddenly found themselves encircled on all sides, with nowhere to maneuver freely. Despite their predicament, they fought with extraordinary ferocity, launching desperate assaults in every direction, attempting to break through the encirclement. Watching from a distance with his personal guard, Qutuz saw the left flank of his army nearly collapse under the pressure of Mongols fighting for survival. In that critical moment, he reportedly cried out 3 times, "O Islam! O Allah, grant your servant Qutuz victory over these Mongols." He then personally led a charge to reinforce the crumbling flank. The Mongols were driven back and retreated toward the area of Bisan, with Qutuz's forces in close pursuit. The Mongols briefly managed to regroup and mount a counterattack, but the momentum had irreversibly shifted. The Mamluks now possessed both the tactical and psychological upper hand. Kitbuqa and nearly the entire Mongol force that had remained in the area were killed. The Mamluks suffered significant casualties of their own, but the Mongol contingent was effectively wiped out. The Battle of Ain Jalut sent shockwaves throughout the known world. For the first time in living memory, the Mongol war machine had been decisively defeated in open battle. The aura of invincibility that had terrified nations from China to Eastern Europe was shattered. Yet the Mongols did not simply accept this defeat and withdraw permanently. Hulagu returned to Syria in 1262, determined to exact revenge for the loss at Ain Jalut. His efforts were complicated, however, by conflict with Hulagu Khan of the Golden Horde, who had converted to Islam and turned against his own kinsman Hulagu, attacking his forces in retribution for the sacking of Baghdad. This internal war among the Mongol Khanates significantly weakened Hulagu's capacity to sustain his campaign, though he and his successors continued pressing against Mamluk territory regardless. The Ilkhanid Mongols launched repeated assaults toward Cairo between 1281 and 1312. They achieved a single victory in 1300, but it proved temporary and strategically inconclusive. Finally, in 1323, as the once mighty Mongol Empire began to fragment under the weight of its own internal divisions, the Ilkhanid ruler ultimately negotiated a peace agreement with the Mamluk Sultanate, a formal acknowledgement that the conquest of Egypt would never come to pass.